Hey everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. In this video, I'm going to be giving you 3 data points, 3 reasons why now is not the time to be bearish on Bitcoin and crypto. And I'm going to be doing that with my camera off because I'm going to be pulling up some charts and I want to make sure that my face isn't in the way of you being able to see them. Also, I'm having a little bit of a bad hair day. So if you guys like the content or if you just want me to get a haircut, subscribe and like the video. Follow us on Twitter at Upside Down Data. We put out regular updates there about the market, including about our UDPI risk indicator, which will make a cameo appearance later in this episode. But for now, let's dive in. So there's a lot of fear in the market right now. You've probably noticed. What I've pulled up right here is the Crypto Fear and Greed Index, which is a composite index. It tracks sentiment across the market. And so it tells you what market participants are feeling right now. What they're feeling right now is extreme fear. The reading today is 25, which is deep into the red territory. And so I thought it would be timely to talk about, where we are in the market, what we should be expecting, and what the data are telling us. Here's reason number 1 why now is not the time to be bearish. And it comes right out of this Fear and Greed Index. And that is that fear precedes upside when we look at the history of the asset. Hat tip here to Econometrics. It's a good follow on Twitter and has a Substack as well if you guys are interested. This is a chart that Econometrics did, just graphing the price history of Bitcoin over the past couple of years and color-coded based on the Fear and Greed Index. And what's pretty apparent right away is that these fearful areas where you see the color coding flip blue tend to precede moves to the upside. They tend to pay off for those who accumulate during those periods of time. It's when the market is greedy that we want to start worrying about downside. And so here's data point number 1, that we're actually in a zone right now that historically tends to predict a market recovery, not necessarily right away, but that's what tends to happen more often than not. So that's data point number 1, that now is not the time to be overly bearish despite the price action in the market. Number 2, here's some on-chain data for you. Bitcoin miners are not selling their stacks right now. This is a graph of the Puell multiple. The Puell multiple is an indicator that tells you how profitable mining is at any given point in time. And this orange line, which is the profitability of mining, spikes when we're nearing a top. It's actually been very reliable in doing that throughout the history of Bitcoin. Both market cycle tops and even to some degree these local tops as well. And if we expect this to continue happening, that miners selling their stacks is going to predict a top or the beginning of a downturn in the market, then it's pretty notable that we're not seeing that at all right now. Right now, mining is not approaching a top in its profitability, and miners are not selling their stacks. So there's a second reason, that now is not the time to be bearish on the market. For this chart, hat tip to Crypto Caesar. You can follow him on Twitter there. Reason number 3, that now is not the time to be bearish on the market. This one is pretty interesting. And the one that you're probably least likely to have encountered elsewhere. And that is that a lot of the selling over the past 40 days or so since the market topped has been coming from one place. And that place, or that region, is Asia. Here we're looking at the price change of Bitcoin during Asia working hours versus during Asian working hours. And what we can see is that over the past month in particular, the price has been getting beaten, taking a pounding during Asia working hours, which indicates that there are a lot of Asian sellers. For this one, hat tip to Johannes Hoffman, who's a researcher at Glassnode. What's really significant here is that this pattern is restricted to Asia. And when we look at the US and the European charts, we do not see this same pattern. Here's the US. Over the same period of time, we see that we're actually in the green. During US working hours over the past month, Bitcoin's price has tended to appreciate. Same with European working hours. So it's only when we're in Asian working hours and the US is asleep, that we're seeing this downturn over the past month. And this is probably tied to policy and to exchanges in Asia that have been restricting their policy and giving people a scare. I'm not going to go into the details of that. The point to understand here is that this is not a market-wide phenomenon. This downturn that we've seen is actually probably being caused to a large degree by specific factors that are beginning to exhaust themselves. You can see that these bars are starting to top out here, or bottom out, I should say. And it might be the case that this trend that we're seeing a lot of selling during Asia working hours might be beginning to abate. And if we see that Asia and the US and the Europeans start to realign on this, get on the same page about where the market is heading, then we could see this selling, this downturn as a whole, start to come to a close. These are 3 reasons that the data say that now is not the time to be bearish on Bitcoin and crypto. At the same time, I don't want to overstate the case or give the false impression that we have to bounce immediately. I'll be the first to tell you that I do not know what's going to happen in the short term. Nobody does. But we can make some educated projections about the general directions that we're likely to head in the long term. And that's what I've been trying to do here. At the same time, to give this other side of the picture, or at least one element of this other side of the picture, I'm going to pull up the UDPI chart, which is our risk indicator chart for Bitcoin, and see what we can learn from that about whether it looks like we're in for an imminent reversal or whether we're going to need to be patient. Despite these positive signs that I've just showed you about how now is not the time to be overly bearish on Bitcoin and crypto, we still do need to be patient. Here's the UDPI output for Bitcoin. On the vertical axis here, we're just looking at how risky the asset is at any given point in time. Up at the top, 5 indicates a lot of risk and a lot of remaining downside potential that's realistic for the near term. And the opposite to the downside with -5, where when we're reaching those low levels, that means that the asset is quite low risk and that there's plenty of realistic upside potential for the near future, but only limited realistic downside potential. Right now, Bitcoin is approaching this -1 level, which has been a pretty important level in the past. We've seen it get rejected there as resistance several times in its history. We've also seen it bounce off of the -1 level as support, including going into this parabolic rally near the end of 2017. Now Bitcoin, for the past couple of years, has been making these higher lows on the UDPI. It's going to be interesting to see where this bottoms out. There's no sign of a reversal, though. And, the risk will probably continue its downtrend for the time being unless there's a major reversal on the price. As we've talked about a few times in recent videos, if the price continues to grind sideways, the risk is going to continue to move down for the next bit of time. And we would need to see a significant reversal on the price chart for that to be interrupted. What I'm looking for on this chart, and I've mentioned this before, is contact with the -2 level. Because although the -1 level has been important at a few different points in the past, the -2 level has been the launch pad, actually, for the major parabolic rallies in Bitcoin's past. Going all the way back to here, we can see that hovering around this 0.2 level was really important, holding it ultimately as support before this blast off in 2013. And then, we know that cycle had 2 peaks. The launch pad for those moves was this -2 level on the UDPI. Similarly, in 2017, battling for this level and then ultimately holding it as support, consolidating just above it on the risk before blasting off into outer space. Once again, this -2 level proved important. Same thing in 2020. We had some significant volatility on risk right around this -2 level, ultimately bouncing off of it multiple times, holding it as support before blasting off. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see Bitcoin's approach to this -2 level, see whether it begins to lose momentum, to slow down there and perhaps show some signs of bottoming formation and reversal coming in around that at -2. This is not a prediction. Let me just make that clear. I do not know what's going to happen, but that would be an interesting thing to see if we saw that there were some indications of it happening because of what that has led to in the past. These big moves to the upside. So that is just a hypothesis and something to watch. In either case, I think the moral of the story here, looking at this UDPI chart, and this is not the only way that we could come to this conclusion, but I do think that it reinforces the conclusion, is that we have to be patient. Now is not the time to be bearish, and there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic about where the market is headed, at least in the midterm future. But we have to be patient because we simply do not know what's going to happen next. A little bit of an ironic quote here that I'm pulling up, because Warren Buffett is a notorious, curmudgeonly hater of crypto without seeming to really understand it, or at least conveying that he understands it. But he's absolutely right about this. The man is a legendary investor, and what he's saying here applies to crypto too. The crypto market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. So folks, be among the patient, and let's see what happens. So again, if you like this, subscribe and like the video. Hope this was useful. See you next time.